The aim of this film is to discuss environmental issues reproduced by the fast fashion industry. Fast fashion refers to the rapid production of clothes by mass retailers for a low cost as a response to trends. This film is primarily focused on the impact aspects of the fashion industry, such as the collection of materials, the transportations of goods, and disposal of waste has on the environment. Central to the development of the fast fashion industry is globalization. Globalization can be defined as the increase of connection, industry, and technology across the world. This film explores the impact globalization has had on environmental issues with a focus on the developing world. To understand the extent to which the fashion industry affects the environment, this film examines social theory such as Beck's notion of risk society and ecological Marxism.
To begin to understand globalization and the third world within the context of the fashion industry, it is important to begin by examining social theory. A sociological theory which fits into globalization and the environmental impacts is Beck and Giddens' theory of risk society. Risk society refers to the way modern society responds to risk. By risk, Beck and Giddens refer to any environmental issues that have arisen because of modernization processes. For example, Beck and Giddens attribute the rise in pollution to features of modernity such as industrialization. Therefore, Beck and Giddens cite pollution as a manufactured risk. Unlike natural disaster, manufactured risks are characterized by human involvement. This suggests that society is responsible for both producing and reducing environmental risks. Therefore, Beck and Giddens argued that the process of modernization created a new set of complications for society. Central to risk society is the notion of reflexivity. This is the idea that society can examine itself and identify problems that will surface as a result of modernization processes. This means that society has the power to change its practices to reduce the risks that may occur. Essentially, as society continues to develop, we become increasingly aware of issues the process of modernization has created. Arguably, the rise in sustainable fashion trends can be perceived as a means of reducing the environmental risks associated with fast fashion. Fast fashion refers to the rapid production of clothes produced by mass retailers for a low cost as a response to trends. Beck and Giddens recognize that factors such as globalization means that risks of fast fashion are widespread globally rather than restricted to one area or country.
Globalization is described as the free movement of goods, services, and people across the world. Tisdall, in a 2001 article, states the type of globalization most prominent when talking about the environment is economic globalization as a result of global economic growth, whereby the debate is divided on how beneficial this is for the environment. The environmental cousins curve, EKC, is used to look at macro changes in environmental quality in relation to economic growth, as it was used to study the relationship between the environment and income. Some countries experienced an improving environment as a result of globalization. Meanwhile, elsewhere it is deteriorating. Environment improves in some respects but is worse in others, making evaluation harder. Globalization only seems to benefit countries that have participated in it. This suggests an increase in environmental degradation in places with increasing economic inequality. Most notably known as the Third World, where globalization has caused the most displacement in developing countries because rich nations use Third World countries in order to mass produce products, as there is often a lack of laws surrounding the environment and labour use. Overall, a third of the impact from consumption in wealthy nations is displaced into the Third World. The use of the Third World market has resulted in an exploitation of labour, as well as being an excessive amount of materials being used to mass produce cheap products. Indirect effects on the environment are hidden from consumers, such as the carbon emissions from transporting goods from China, pollutants, resources, and water, leading to vast environmental issues in these developing countries, such as air pollution, water consumption, energy usage, and biodiversity loss.
The usage of planes in transporting textile goods between countries also impacts the environment in a negative way. The air miles for a single piece of clothing is something which is not often considered by consumers. However, in a recent study of a specific dress from Zara, it showed just how many air miles goes into transporting goods. This is the journey of a single Zara dress. The dress started in Europe, where lyocell fibers were sourced from trees. It then travelled to Egypt, where the fibers were spun into yarn. After this, the dress travels to China, where the yarn is spun into fabric. Once this process is finished, the dress travels once again to Spain for the fabric to be dyed pink. From Spain, it travels to Morocco for fabric to be cut and sewn into the dress. Lastly, it travels to the UK to be distributed to consumers, overall making a journey of 14,863 miles. Water pollution is also another negative impact on the environment from the fashion industry. The clothing and textile industry produces 25% of the world's chemical waste. This is caused by products such as sulfuric acid, bleach, dyes, heavy metals, and fats, which are being poured directly into rivers from the factories. For example, Bangladesh's textile industry produces 56 billion litres of contaminated water a year, with 80% of the world's wastewater being dumped back into the environment, causing rivers, lakes, and oceans to be polluted. These pollutants cause water degradation, and therefore have a major impact on all aspects of life. Loss of fish stocks through the reduction of oxygen levels resulting in dead zones, where essentially water is devoid of life. As well as this, there is a production of harmful algae blooms which produce neurotoxins. This affects both flora and fauna that are dependent on the water. Humans therefore suffer due to both their water and food sources being polluted and harmful. Due to the negative environmental impacts of creating clothing, the Environmental Protection Agency under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act considers textile manufacturing facilities to be some of the biggest generators of hazardous waste. In general, for every 1 kilogram of textiles manufactured, 10 kilograms of chemicals are used and 23 kilograms of greenhouse gases are produced. Developing countries overlook many of these environmental issues in favour of developing the wealth of their country. In Schneiberg's theory of the treadmill of production, he points out that these developing countries have employed historical Western industrial techniques to further their economic development, as they want to catch up to the West's economic power status. It is therefore hypocritical for the developed countries to tell the developing countries to stop using damaging and harmful techniques of production in terms of environmental degradation, as these developed countries once used these methods themselves. The production of fast fashion fits into ecological Marxism, whereby there is a fundamental contradiction between capitalism and the ecosystem consisting of ecological destruction, and the fact that capitalism must destroy the ecosystem to expand and grow. Overall, the combination of air pollution and water pollution produced by the fashion industry causes it to be the second biggest polluter in the world, only preceded by the oil industry. All of this causes our ecosystem to become overtaxed and unsafe, destroying the world in which we live.
Cotton is the textile used for more than 50% of clothing items in the 21st century, even though it is not a sustainable or environmentally beneficial material. It is not sustainable because of the sheer amount of water it takes to make enough cotton to produce a single item of clothing. It takes 713 gallons, or 2,700 litres, just to make a single cotton t-shirt. Health professionals recommend that to prevent dehydration, you should drink 2 litres of water a day. By this reasoning, the water used to produce enough cotton to make a single t-shirt would be enough water for a family of 4 to remain hydrated for almost a year. It is also the equivalent of almost 34 baths full of water. On top of this, cotton creates a need for the use of toxic pesticides and insecticides. It is estimated that cotton is responsible for the use of 6% of the world's pesticides, which is more than any other crop worldwide. In addition to this, harmful pesticides can reduce the quality of crop-growing soil and water. Runoff, a pesticide from cotton fields in the US, has led to 6 deaths, 2 stillbirths, and 2,000 people being taken ill. Overall, pesticides linked with cotton growth are very harmful to the environment in a number of ways. They can poison animals and destroy food chains, prevent nitrogen fixation and therefore prevent crops and other plants from growing, and cause behavioural changes in aquatic animals, often causing them to abandon their nests and fall victim to predators. Pesticides are also a major cause for the drastic decrease in the honeybee population.
In every step of the fast fashion clothing life cycle, there are environmental and occupational hazards. For example, polyester, which is the most widely used manufactured material, is made from petroleum. However, the demand for man-made fibers, especially polyester, has nearly doubled in the last 15 years due to the rising production of these materials. The manufacturing of synthetics is very energy intensive and requires large amounts of crude oil, releases volatile organic compounds, particulate matter and acid gases, such as hydrogen chloride. Although in terms of the energy used, it has been found that in a garment's life cycle, domestic laundry of the item is responsible for 82% of this used energy. To combat the harmful byproducts of man-made fibers and fast fashion, some fashion brands are aiming to develop eco-fashions. The International Standards Organization has defined eco-fashions as identifying the general environmental performance of a product within a product group based on its whole life cycle in order to contribute to improvements in key environmental measures and to support sustainable consumption patterns. More innovative eco-fashions are being developed at different levels of the fashion spectrum. Patagonia, a major retailer in casual wear, has been selling fleece clothing made from post-consumer plastic bottles since 1993. Between 1993 and 2006, the company has said to have approximately saved 86 million soda bottles from ending up in landfill.
Interest in sustainable clothes production and consumption is growing. This can be seen in the sales of such clothing in the UK. Between 2008 and 2009, there was an upward trend in sustainable clothing, with the purchase of these clothes increasing by 93%. The market value of sustainable clothing is approximately £172 million a year. Lowe and Davenport stress the significance of this ethical consumption, suggesting that ethical consumers have a role to play in changing the world. However, studies show that consumers who hold ethical views often do not transfer their intentions into ethical purchase behaviour. This forms a values action gap. This can be seen in the increasing popularity of fast fashion in an environmentally conscious society. This links into the idea put forward by Masuda of social disutility, whereby pollution, congestion, and excessive environmental damage, as well as other negative environmental factors, increases with the rising consumption. Masuda believed that consumers will eventually come to place more importance on social utility and constraints will be imposed on individual consumption.
Clothes which are no longer in use do not always end up in landfill. They are also recycled in these three main ways. The unused clothing is resold by the primary consumer to other consumers at a lower price, for example on apps and websites such as Depop and eBay. Secondly, the clothes may be exported in bulk for sale in markets in the developing countries. Thirdly, the clothes can be chemically or mechanically recycled into raw material for the manufacture of other apparel. In recent years, however, there has been a massive increase in the buying of second-hand and vintage clothes. This is thought to be down to both a change in values, where people are looking to be more environmentally friendly, and also a rebellion against the mass-produced fast fashion, as young people attempt to create an individual identity through their clothing. However, even with this increase, it has been found that only around 1/5 of clothing donated is actually sold in the charity shops. The rest is sold onto textile recyclers cheaply.
In the UK alone, 1.4 million tonnes of textiles go into landfill each year. The increase of fast fashion has led to fewer clothes being reused or recycled, possibly due to the disposable nature of such cheap, low-quality clothing. It is thought that 3/5 of the clothing ends up in landfill within a year of being made, and clothing sold at lowest prices is on average disposed after only 7 to 8 wears. This all suggests that the amount of waste created by consumers is immense and that the increase of fast fashion has had a great negative impact on the environment in terms of landfill. In addition to this, even prior to being sold, around 15% of fabric is wasted in the production process through offcuts, subpar goods, and rejected materials. With 400 billion square meters of fabric produced globally in 2015, this means 60 billion square meters were wasted before even reaching a consumer.
Textile recycling is a long and difficult process. However, it has a much less environmental impact than the use of virgin materials. Despite this, very few clothes are recycled after use. Williams believes that it is not possible to recycle clothing without using virgin resources in the process. Thus, clothing will always have an increasing negative impact. She also believes that recycling perpetuates throwaway culture, as it reduces the guilt associated with waste if clothing is recycled as opposed to being taken to landfill. Nowadays, the majority of clothing is not recycled, and while this can be down to a variety of reasons, it is thought that the amount of clothing recycled could be greatly increased if there is an increased awareness, convenience, and results. Overall, to a larger extent, the fast fashion industry harms the environment more than protects it. This is seen by the fact that the fashion industry is the second largest contributor to air miles and water pollution. This relates to the ideas of globalization, whereby the world is increasingly becoming more interconnected. Where there is an increase in products being spread globally, the environmental costs also increase. Through the transportation of goods and the production of cotton, the fashion industry has a negative impact on the environment. For example, one cotton t-shirt uses approximately 2,700 litres of water. Additionally, the production of cotton requires the use of toxic pesticides. Central to fast fashion is the use of unsustainable materials such as polyester, which requires petroleum to manufacture it. Conversely, people are becoming increasingly aware of the dangers of fast fashion and are more inclined to become ethical consumers. Therefore, there has been a rise in eco-fashion and the recycling of clothes in contemporary society. This can reflect the ideas of risk society and reflexivity, whereby as society develops, it becomes more aware of the environmental issues that it has manufactured.